The city was loud that day, packed with cheering crowds, vendors selling snacks, and children laughing under a warm afternoon sun. It looked like any ordinary sports event. A little girl held her father's hand tightly, her eyes wide with excitement, completely unaware that this would be the last normal moment of her life. Then came the sound, sharp, sudden, and terrifying. Gunfire cracked through the air like thunder, and the world turned to chaos in seconds. People screamed and scattered in every direction. In that single heartbeat of confusion, the little girl's small hand slipped away from her father's grip. She fell. A bullet had found her chest, and her white shirt slowly turned dark red. Her father dropped to his knees beside her, calling her name over and over, his voice breaking with every word. He didn't think. He couldn't think. He scooped her up and ran, pushing through the panicked crowd, with nothing but raw, desperate love driving his legs forward. When he reached the hospital, the doctors rushed her inside. They told him to wait. But no father in that moment could simply stand still and wait. He pushed through the doors and found her lying on a stretcher in a crowded hallway, doctors pressing cloth against her wound with trembling hands. There were no available operating rooms. The hospital was overwhelmed and underfunded, stripped bare by the very people who were supposed to protect it. She was 8 years old when she took her last breath, 8 years old, with her whole life ahead of her, her laugh still echoing in her father's memory as they placed a white sheet over her body. When her mother arrived, the two parents collapsed into each other, their grief so heavy it felt like the walls were closing in around them. But this wasn't an accident, and it wasn't random. Someone had deliberately chose her and this child as a message. Someone had ordered this little girl's death as punishment for her father doing his job, for daring to stand against corruption in a system rotting from the inside out. Her father's name was Miguel, a dedicated police officer who had recently arrested a powerful man named Sandro, a senior Brazilian official who had embezzled over $200 million meant for public services. Miguel had built the case carefully, gathered the evidence, and put the handcuffs on himself. But the moment Sandro was behind bars, money quietly changed hands. The police chief, bought and paid for, buried the evidence and signed the release papers with a smile. Sandro walked out of custody without spending a single night in a cell. And in his arrogance, in his untouchable rage, he gave the order, hurt Miguel where it would destroy him forever. He chose the daughter. What made it even more unbearable was what came next. The same hospitals left without funding due to corrupt officials stealing public resources had no surgical capacity to save her. The money that should have bought equipment, trained surgeons, and stocked operating rooms had vanished into the pockets of powerful men who would never spend a night worrying about medical care. Miguel's daughter didn't just die from a bullet. She died from a system that had been deliberately broken. And every single person responsible for that broken system had a face, a name, and an address. Miguel memorized every one of them. Then, as if fate itself was mocking the grieving father, Sandro appeared on national television, perfectly dressed, perfectly composed, announcing his campaign for the Brazilian presidency. He stood at a podium surrounded by cameras and applause, speaking about justice and the future of the nation. Miguel watched from the shadows of the crowd, wearing a hooded jacket, his face expressionless but his eyes burning with a fire that had no intention of going out. He had come with a plan and the willingness to die carrying it out. He was no longer just a police officer. He was something else now, something the system had created the moment it let his daughter bleed out in a hospital hallway. Before Miguel could act, Sandro's guards spotted him and beat him down in the street without mercy. But the universe, in one strange and violent turn, intervened. From somewhere deep in the crowd, a masked figure hurled a Molotov cocktail at the conference building. Fire erupted. The crowd surged into chaos. Tear gas hissed through the air as riot police scrambled for control. And there, rolling to a stop at Miguel's feet in the middle of all that madness, was a gas mask. He picked it up slowly, looked at it for just a moment, and put it on. Something shifted in him in that instant. Not a decision exactly, more like a door swinging open that would never close again. Fueled by grief and something beyond ordinary anger, Miguel moved through the chaos like a ghost with purpose. He overpowered guards, seized a weapon, and scaled the stone pillars of the burning conference building with his bare hands. He reached the roof, shattered a window, and disappeared inside. Moving through the smoke-filled corridors with terrifying calmness, he took down two guards without hesitation and kicked open the door to Sandro's office. He found the powerful man crouched beneath his own desk, shaking like a child. This man who had ordered the death of an 8-year-old girl now begging for his life and offering money with tremblingly. "Peace." Miguel said nothing. He grabbed Sandro by the collar and dragged him into the open. Sandro stammered and pleaded, offering 10 times whatever amount someone could have paid. Miguel answered him the only way that felt honest, with his fists. Blow after blow landed with years of grief and rage behind each one. The nose broke first, then the jaw. Blood covered the floor. The man who had bought his way out of prison, who had stolen from hospitals, who had ordered the murder of a child, he met his end not in a courtroom, but at the hands of the father he had broken. Miguel, bleeding from his own wounds, returned to a hidden shelter, sterilized a needle in a lighter's flame, took a long drink of something strong, and stitched himself back together in the dark. It was the quietest moment in the film, and somehow the saddest. The next morning, the city woke up to the news of Sandro's death. Security cameras had captured portions of the event, but the masked figure remained unidentified. Police made arrests among the protest leaders, and in that sweep, Miguel found himself face to face with a sharp-eyed, short-haired woman who recognized him immediately, and whom he recognized in return. Her name was Nar, and she was no ordinary store clerk. She was a hacker, working undercover, and she had footage of him. Rather than use it against him, she passed him a set of numbers and told him how to find it, along with the quiet revelation that she had made copies. Miguel retrieved the footage and secured his own secret. But more importantly, he found himself with an unexpected ally in a war that was far from over. Because Sandro had never been the architect. He had been a tool, expensive, dangerous, but replaceable. The true power behind Brazil's corruption was a network of 6 elite figures who controlled the country from the shadows, politicians, judges, businessmen, all connected by greed and protected by each other. Miguel reached out to Nar with a proposition: hack into their systems, extract the documents that proved everything, and he would free her imprisoned mother once it was done. She didn't even hesitate. Within hours, Miguel had the files. He put on his mask, checked his weapons, and began what would become one of the most brutal and calculated campaigns of justice, or vengeance, depending on how you look at it, that the city had ever seen. The first target was the mayor, confronted high above the city in a glass tower where powerful men assumed they were safe. Miguel sent him over the edge from the 100th floor, and the fall was long. The second was a senior justice official, shot at close range inside his own vehicle, the man responsible for upholding the very laws he had spent years selling. The third was a congressman, found surrounded by stacks of stolen money, wearing a smile that vanished the instant a bullet found the space between his eyes. The fourth died through a window 300 meters away, a single shot from an M80 to sniper rifle assembled with the quiet precision of a man who had nothing left to lose. The fifth was caught mid-celebration, completely unaware that a single bullet was already on its way. 5 men. One night. The city held its breath. People began calling him the Awakener, a name that spread through the streets like fire. He became a symbol whispered about in coffee shops and carved into protest signs, a ghost that the corrupt suddenly feared in a way they had never feared the law. But one target remained. His name was Anto, a tycoon of immense wealth and influence, the one who had truly pulled the strings from the beginning. The night Miguel went to his mansion, he found Anto in an argument with his own son beside the swimming pool. When Miguel fired, the son moved and took the bullet meant for his father. It was a tragic and brutal accident that would send the entire situation spiraling in a direction no one could have predicted. Anto, now consumed by the same grief he had once inflicted on others, unleashed his most dangerous weapon. A ruthless professional assassin sent to find the Awakener and destroy everything connected to him. The assassin visited no store first and killed her boss as a message, a warning written in blood that she returned to find alone and devastating. She ran to Miguel's hideout to warn him, but the assassin and his team had already broken in. What followed was a brutal, close-quarters fight through smoke and chaos, Miguel buying not just enough time to escape while he tore through the mercenaries one by one, disarming, breaking, and eliminating each threat with a frightening efficiency born from total desperation. But Na was captured at the back door, and the assassin used her as the only weapon left that could actually stop Miguel, a human bargain. The terms were simple and monstrous. Kill Anto's rival in the upcoming presidential election, or No dies. For a man who had already lost everything once, the thought of another innocent person dying because of him was unbearable. Miguel agreed, and carried the weight of that decision like a stone in his chest all the way to the campaign event. He positioned himself behind the stage, assembled his weapon, and aimed at a woman whose only crime was standing in Anto's way. His finger found the trigger, and that was the moment his former partner, Adu, stepped out of the dark and stopped him. The 2 men fought on a narrow backstage staircase, not just with fists, but with everything they believed in. Adu had followed the trail of clues all the way back to a small radio that Miguel's daughter used to carry, and he had put it all together. He knew who the Awakener was. He knew what grief could do to a man. When the fight paused and both guns were drawn and pointed, Adu asked Miguel to remove his mask, and Miguel slowly did, and for the first time, in what felt like forever, he stood exposed. Adu told him that becoming a murderer made him no different from the men he was hunting. Miguel looked at his old friend and asked a simple, devastating question. Why had they become police officers? To uphold the law, and yet the law had done nothing. The law had freed Sandro. The law had let his daughter die.